So you come to the best part of parenting multiples and honestly in children in general, the sleep training. Yes, the longest part of parenting, and it is by far a mission and a half to get through what we call the sleep training period. Because you have many different jumping on points, you have regressions, you have different stages of how long they sleep, how little they sleep. It all varies. So I'm hoping to share my experience of sleep training our 5 kids, the 2 singletons and triplets. If you're listening because you have multiples yourself and you're wanting to finally get some sleep, because I know how sleep deprived you can be when not just even having multiples, but having one baby, you're sleep deprived. Now imagine trying to have 2 or more, or 3 in our case, right? So I want to talk about sleep training. Welcome to the Triplet Double Podcast. My name is Isaiah Hernandez, and I'm a proud father of 5 kids under the age of 5. If you haven't already, make sure to follow us on social media. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, YouTube. You can find me at Triplet Double. That's the handle name. So yeah, just jump along, and I always try to post clips on there. I'll post some images of the kids once in a while, but primarily I'll share some just in general videos, some podcast clips, some of my own takes that I'm doing while I'm in the office and all that. Let's get started with the episode. So I want to talk about sleep training because I think sleep training is important. Sleep training is an important aspect for any parent. I've said this before. Whether you have one baby or more than one, twins, triplets, etc., you'll find that sleep training is going to be challenging because every child's going to be different. They're all going to be very similar. Everyone's going to have similar experiences. And some parents are super lucky and they get through the sleep training period super fast and it's not even really a thing. And some aren't so lucky. And some run into, those babies that just won't stay asleep or they won't sleep through the night, or they have to be held to be, to sleep comfortably. That's tough because I think as parents, we need to be able to have our own space. We need to be able to have that separation. And ultimately, it's better for the child, too, if you're able to help them sleep train, sleep on their own, and get on a good, comfortable schedule. So what I want to do is I want to talk about a couple of different things here. I want to go in through the experiences I had with 2 singletons, with Logan, my oldest, and then Layden, second oldest. I'll talk about their experience of sleep training. And then some of my things that, that Elizabeth and I did right and wrong. So there's a lot of learning there, especially with your first child. You definitely have a huge learning curve. And you kind of, you do some things that you kind of look back and you're like, oh, I wish I would have done that a little differently. And then by the time you have your second kid, you kind of realize that. And then, you're able to take those experiences and those lessons from your first child and apply and, learn from that and be able to apply what you learned into the second child, and it usually becomes easier. Typically, that's what they say. And in our experience, it was easier to sleep train Layden than it was Logan, I believe. And then you have an unexpected juggernaut, multiples. We had the triplets. That was a ride in its own, and I can't say enough how busy that was. You guys know, shared this multiple times on past episodes, but, I'll get into all of that. So I'll go in through the singletons, and then finally, probably what you want to hear the most is how did we sleep train our triplets? So that's what I'll get into. Okay, so when we had Logan, like I mentioned before, he was underweight. So we had to wake him up in the middle of the night and feed him more than you would a bigger sized baby. So we had to feed him every 2 to 3 hours. Now with Logan, I will say that probably looking back, we should have probably implemented more of a Ferber method sooner, because I did rock him to sleep probably until he was about 1, rocked him to sleep every night. And, it's nice because I think it's your first child. So of course you want that experience and that bonding of being able to hold your child and rock them until they're asleep and comfortable in your arms. That's awesome. I do. I look back and I'm like, yeah, I did love that experience. And there has to be a certain point though where you're like, okay, I can't hold this baby or this child forever while they go to sleep. You just can't. And Logan definitely did not have a hard time like winging off being held. It did help him go to sleep by rocking him, but we knew at 1 year old, we were already expecting Layden around the corner. She was coming up. And so we knew, okay, well, we have to figure something out because we can't rock him anymore like how we used to. And not just because we have another child coming, but also it's just time, And we never had Logan stay in our room. I know a lot of parents do this. There's nothing against it. A lot of parents will, put a bassinet in their bedroom and have the newborn with them at all times. We never did that. We had always wanted to make sure that, in our eyes, doesn't mean it's the right way, and I'm not criticizing anyone who does it differently. In our eyes, we wanted that separation. Like, we knew we needed that separation because we knew we needed it for our marriage, and we thought it would be better for our kids, if they had their own room from day one and they slept in their own room from day one. Now, I know there's a lot of caution that, especially as a new parent, you're like, oh, I want to make sure I'm watching them when they sleep. Of course, they roll over, all that. Rightfully so. You should have those worries and those concerns. Like, you should, and that's natural to have those. And we did too, of course. And we weren't just dropping them off in the other room and then going to bed and being like, well, see you later. That was not what we did. What we did was we've invested in a few different like appliances. One of them being the owlet camera. The owlet camera was a great baby monitor because we were able to get the sock that you're able to put around their foot, like their ankle, and it would basically monitor their heartbeat, and it would all sync with the owlet app. So we had the camera over his crib, and then he had a sock from like the first 6 to 8 months. I believe he was wearing the sock. After that, we were like, okay, I think he's okay. He doesn't need it anymore. So we had those monitoring tools for Logan, and that helped us because we had our phones on, and the app, it was able to play it in the background. So if he cried, we heard it, and if any other noise came, we were able to hear that through the app. So that was very helpful. But like, again, we knew that, okay, it's time to not rock them to sleep anymore, like to not rock Logan to sleep anymore. And we probably didn't start doing that until, if I were to think correctly, we probably didn't stop like holding him to sleep. Layden had been a couple months old by then. They're 16 months apart. So we would basically hold him for a while. Like, we held him for a while, not like rock him like a baby like that, but we'd sit down in the chair, hold him, and then I would stay in there. Like, when we lay him down, he was definitely never one of those, unless like he didn't really nap that day. He was always a kid who was like, hey, if I close my eyes for like 2 minutes, I'm recharged and I can go another 6-8 hours. So, he had some challenges going to sleep, like very fast. It would take him a bit, like 30 minutes or longer. So I would hang out in there and I would, stay with him until he fell asleep. And when Layden got older, of course, as a baby, we always held her and we rocked her and we put her to sleep. And then when she got older and we found out we were expecting the triplets, well, we had to figure out, okay, at this time in California, we only had a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, 12 to 1,300 square feet, small. And there's 4 of us right there now, and then we have the triplets coming, so soon to be 7. So things are going to get super crowded. So, but looking back when we had it, the current way was we had our bedroom, Logan had his own bedroom, Layden had her own bedroom. And then what we did was, well, okay, triplets are coming, there's going to be 7 of us. We need to figure this out because we're not keeping, our primary bedroom was not big enough to have 3 bassinets in there and to have the girls in our room. There was just no way. Our primary bedroom was like a regular sized bedroom with just an added bathroom. Not that big. So we knew we had to figure out, okay, how are we going to get the triplets situated into this house? Because that's what our circumstances were at the time. So I think Layden was probably, she was over a year old, of course. So if she was already over a year old, it was like October of 2023. She was about, what is that? She was probably about like 14, 15 months. October 2023, we had converted the bedrooms and we moved Layden to share a bedroom with Logan. So and then the triplets were going to have their own bedroom. So we spent from October to March, basically, we spent that time getting the triplets' bedroom ready. But Layden moved over to Logan's bedroom, and that was fun and challenging, because you got a 2-year-old and you got a 1-year-old in there who obviously, they have energy. They are in the same room together, so they're having fun, and that had its own challenges, but we were able to, kind of figure it out. So here's some things that we did. So when it came to sleep training, we did not really sleep train them looking back, how I probably should have, like Elizabeth and I probably should have. What we did is every time we got them ready for bed, I stopped holding them because, that's just not possible. So we slowly stopped holding them, and what we did is we would lay them in their beds by themselves. We'd lay them in their beds, and I would sit down in the room still because, at this point, leaving caused them to cry and, be upset that they were in there by themselves. So what we did was, I had always played music. Like, music is like the number one thing I've done for my kids, like since the day they were born, all of them. I have always played some type of music, whether it's lullabies or it's actual songs. Like, I go through a whole library that I've created different playlists for, and I will play music for them. So when they were sharing their bedrooms, I did that. Like, I would just sit down, I would play music. And I usually would loop it because I didn't want to go through a whole library. And, the kids, again, when the kids start getting their personality and all that, and you start playing different music that they like or they don't like, they let you know. And when they don't like something, that can get frustrating because they'll keep telling you they don't like it, change it. So I was figuring out, like, okay, I'm just going to loop, like for example, like Somewhere Over the Rainbow or White Sandy Beach. I would loop those songs and I would just let those play, or like Jack Johnson, Upside Down. Like, there was a few go-to songs, and still to this day, I have a few of those go-to songs. So we would do that. We would sit in there and, looking back, I don't know how we did it, but we did it. I would stay in there until they fell asleep, basically. And Elizabeth would too, when her and I would switch. We would stay until they were all asleep. So that, as you can imagine, took probably anywhere to as little as 30 minutes to over an hour and 15. And that's just too long. And at that point, you're just like, well, why not let them sleep with you in your bed, right? But of course, it's good for them to still have their own space and their own room and all that. And so that's what we had done, we had basically stayed in there with them until they had fallen asleep at that stage. And so all of 2024, we primarily did that. Like, that's pretty much was how we got them to go to sleep. And that was always long because I would always fall asleep in there because, it's pitch black in their bedrooms at night and you have the hatch playing. And, if I have a calm song playing, I would often fall asleep in there, and that would suck. And that would suck because by 2024, second half, the triplets were home. So we didn't have the luxury to fall asleep in the bedroom with the two older kids. No, we needed all hands on deck outside of that bedroom because we had bottles and we had other things we had to get ready for the triplets too. So that was something that I wish we would have done differently. I wish we would have pulled that trigger sooner because it was I don't necessarily look back with a ton of regret, but I do think it would have been nice at that stage to be able to have Logan and Layden be able to put themselves to sleep like how they do now. So that was something that, Elizabeth and I would probably definitely regret. Now, in 2025, we moved, and when we moved, we were like, okay, we got to figure out, because the girls are getting older. Big kids are getting older, obviously. So we got to figure out a better method. And so beginning of this year, we started a new method of, we're no longer staying in the bedrooms for Logan or Layden because they still had to share a room while we stayed at our in-laws' house in Colorado. So as we're staying at our in-laws' house, we're pretty much in a similar situation what we had in California. 3 beds, 2 baths. That's basically what we were working with. And so we had the big kids share, and they're sharing their bedroom, and we decided we can't stay in there anymore. So Elizabeth and I talked, we figured it out, and what we did the kids are older now. so they're able to understand better than what they were able to last year. But now all we do is, if we started with naps and then we did it for bedtime, was we just go in there, they lay down, and then we give them like a little high five routine. I play one song. Elizabeth doesn't always play one song, but I play one song because the kids are always asking for like a song. So I'll play one song, and then we do this high five routine that Elizabeth started. We do big kiss, big hug, and then we do high five, we do knucks, and then we do to infinity and beyond. So it's this whole little ritual bedtime routine that we created. And the kids, if you don't do this bedtime routine, the kids lose it. Like Layden is in tears. Like she's like, I need that bedtime routine. And, of course she can calm down, but it means a lot to them. And Elizabeth started something really awesome because we do it every night when we go to bed, whether it's naps or it's actual bedtime. So we do that whole bedtime routine. So in and out of that bedroom now in like 5 to 10 minutes. That's definitely not 10 minutes. That's wrong. Like 5 minutes or less. Like we're done. We'll play one song and then I'm out. And so that's how we got Logan and Layden basically, sleep trained a couple years later. So that was something that we definitely would want to change, and I would recommend changing, but do you? Everyone's entitled to how they want to parent, how they want to sleep train, and how they want to, handle their kids. That was just my advice. When we had as many kids as we did, probably staying in there every night until they fell asleep was not ideal because you lose a whole hour. And it's not just an hour of bonding. It's just an hour of laying down and sitting in a bedroom in like pitch black, waiting for them to sleep. So that can, definitely don't recommend doing that. So there's a couple different methods. And I think this is pretty tough because with one baby, they're like, especially when they have their own room, it does look a little different. Like you do feel a little more guilt, like doing the whole like Ferber method of letting them cry it out because they're in there by themselves. And I do think at that point, like when I look back at that time, I think, we might have had a harder time committing to that. And I don't remember if it was just because of that or like the babies were by themselves, like Logan or Layden were by themselves crying or what it was. But, we didn't commit to that because I think for the most part, Layden went to sleep pretty quick. Like if you held her, she would go to sleep pretty easy, like in like less than 20 minutes. And to me, that's short. I know some of you may be like, oh, well, 20 minutes, that's a long time. And that is a long time. But I think like in 20 minutes, we were able to rock her to sleep pretty easy. Logan had the harder time because Logan just liked to stay awake. Like that's just, that's just how he is. Like to this day, that's how he is still. And he has a lot of energy. So he was a lot harder to do that for. But with Layden, she was able to do that. So I think that's probably really why it didn't really become an issue until we got them to stay in the same room. And then we were like, okay, well, we have to make sure they go to sleep because if we leave, we see them on the outlet, they're still awake playing or whatever it is, like that got harder. And it probably didn't do us any favors that we had, like the way we had the bedroom set up was we had a rocking chair on one wall, and then the back wall, we put both of their toddler beds like side by side. And that was another thing is that we to get them to share a bedroom, we switched it up and we moved Layden from a crib to a toddler bed pretty quickly, like sooner than what we did with Logan, because Logan was in a crib for at least a year and a half. Layden was in a crib for less than a year and a half. So we put them into toddler beds, and that didn't really, that helped, but it didn't help because the reason why it helped was I was able to sit in the middle of those and still hold their hands while we went to sleep. Where it didn't help is that they were able to reach each other and pull each other's hair, tickle each other, whatever it is, that kids do. Like that was the hard part because it's like, okay, they're playing with each other and they're keeping each other up. So that was definitely something where we were like, okay, that's where we noticed it started to get a little harder. And doing the whole staying in there was just not ideal anymore. So when we moved, we made that change. And surprisingly, it took like 2 nights to get it down. Logan is usually fine. Like even when we were in California, he was usually fine if he left the room. And like say it's been an hour, I was sitting in there. I'm like, okay, we can't stay in here that long, dude. Like, I gotta go. Like, unfortunately, we have stuff we have to take care of and get ready for the next day. So he was always usually fine with that. He would, once in a while cry or, throw a tantrum, but nothing like where it was like an every night thing. It was like once in a while. Now, Layden had always been, she was always like more emotional about that. It's like she'd cry more, and she obviously did not want us to leave. But when we moved and we started this, she was about, 2.5. And so she was pretty mature at this point, when it came to that. And it only took about 2 nights for her to get used to it. But the downside now is, and you know what, we're in August now. With this whole sleep training thing, is still working on it because we're barely moving into our new house. We're still at our in-laws. And so the way it is at our in-laws' house is Elizabeth and I stay in one bedroom, and then our suite mate literally is Logan and Layden. Like, they are connected, like they are one bedroom over. Like, we are one wall away from each other. So Logan sleeps through the night, no problem. Layden, though, she is very much like, she will come into our room. She sneaks into our room every night. I think I can probably count on my hand the number of times she has not, like that she has slept through the night on her own completely. She comes into our room still every night between like midnight and 3 a.m. Between those hours, she will always come in when we're knocked out, and she'll always climb in bed. And she is a hard sleeper because she sprawls and she kicks and she slaps, and she's just, she hits you everywhere that you don't want to be hit when you're sleeping. So that's something that we're still working on. So to this day, she still does that. August 2025, she's still doing that. And, I don't know. I'm hoping when we move, we can nip that, because there's going to be a lot bigger separation. We're not going to be suite mates anymore, right? Door to door. We have a floor separation now. Not like a giant, like, third story, but we have like at least like 7 steps upstairs that separate us from where her bedroom's at now, and a big hallway. So I'm hoping she will eventually be like, that's too long of a walk. But you never know. So I'm hoping, I'll keep you guys updated about that. So that was basically our journey with Logan and Layden. We didn't sleep train as much as looking back, as I'd like to have. But we knew with the triplets, okay, we had to do things a little differently. And that was hard to do because when the triplets came home, we still had 2 toddlers that needed our attention. So it's not like we were able to strictly focus on the triplets and get them, situated or sleep trained automatically. No, there was a bit of a learning curve there. And so when we had the triplets, we rocked them to sleep for all their naps. And we did this in a way where one person could do this, like could do it by themselves. Because the way it worked was, during every nap, we would put forgot the name of they're like rockers, basically. They're like rockers that are like a little elevated off the ground that you can rock with like your foot. And they have like a little bit of like a vibration to it. So like it kind of like, massages them to sleep or vibrates them, give them that motion. And so we would put typically Amelia and Nora in those. Like we'd get them ready for bed for all their naps and bedtime. And then, we would put them in their sleeper sacks, and then we would lay them into the rockers. And so as we laid them in there, usually Samara would want to be held, or it would really depend on who was having the hardest time, because we would give them each toys, and then we would just we'd sit in our rocking chair in the girls' room, and then we would hold one baby, and then with our feet, we would rock the other 2 to sleep. And I would play music, and I know Elizabeth would play music and lullabies. And so that's what we were doing with the triplets. And so one person was able to put them to sleep. Of course, it took probably about 30 minutes on average, maybe, usually shorter. The girls, honestly, the triplets were really good, when it came to all that. Like, if they were individual babies, I'd probably have been like, man, these are easy babies. But I think because there's 3 of them, of course, it's naturally going to be a lot more challenging. But they caught on really quickly to a lot of different things. Like, they were pretty sharp when it came to that stuff, sleeping, eating, all that. So we would hold them and rock the other 2, and then would sit them down. Like I remember it was always like a very quiet game. That's how we had to do it, because like I'd get up slowly from the chair, walk over whoever I was holding, slowly put them in the crib, and then I would go to the other two, pick them up, same thing. And then I have to like tiptoe out to make sure I didn't make any crazy sudden moves, because if you did, you already know that sometimes any little noise can like get them. They'll start, doing their little coos or start slowly like crying a little bit, and then they'll sneak out and close the door and just hope that they slept for longer than 30 minutes. And that was a hard time, because there was times where they did not sleep that long. And there was a lot of, ups and downs with that, because especially for naps, because the hard part was with as little as they were at that time, last year, they weren't great at, sleeping through all their crying. And my other point to this story too, is that before I go any further and I forget, what I want to say about having the triplets, like another part that made it kind of a little easier, was that we knew we never wanted to separate the triplets. Like we knew, and I think that goes for anyone with parents of twins or triplets, right? You never want to separate the kids, because they came into this world together, and I think it's very comforting for them to be in that same room. I know we may not 100% see it, but I think from our experience, I thought they really benefited from sharing that bedroom, having all their cribs in the same area. So that's why I thought, like, this will get into kind of how we sleep train the girls now, but I think that's why I thought it was a little easier. And maybe it was because we had the two singletons, Logan and Layden, prior, but I thought, having them be triplets, I thought it was easier for them to kind of be together and to soothe each other when they went to sleep, because they were all in the same room, right? So that was how we had done it at the old house. We had basically had to rock them to sleep. So from March all the way until we moved, we rocked them to sleep at some level, right? Whether we held them or we had them in the rockers and they fell asleep. And we'd give them a bottle too, of course. They usually always had a bottle when they went to sleep, and that helped comfort them. Then when we moved, we still had to do this for at least a couple months. But we knew that this was just not sustainable anymore, unfortunately. Like, I wish I think as a parent, you wish you could always hold your kids and, comfort them and just be there and protect them from everything. But at some point you gotta let go a little bit, and you gotta help them. You gotta push them a little bit to be independent. And that's what we had to do. So we had to figure that out. And when we moved, we just had always ran into issues, like, because there's 5 kids, 3 of them being babies. Like, if you were by yourself, you were essentially screwed. Like, there was no way for you to get these kids, all 5 of these kids, it's jumping through hoops to get the girls to nap if you're by yourself. Because what you have to do is you have to get them all changed, you have to get them in their sleeper sacks. Meanwhile, you got 2 toddlers in the living room, running wild, doing whatever they want, right? Like, they're having fun playing, but also they're unsupervised because you're by yourself. So what goes into that is that, but if you're by yourself, trying to get these babies to nap is a mission in its own, because if you have help, at least you have someone to have eyes on the toddlers, and you still have that challenge of getting these girls to go to sleep. But when you're by yourself, like, you can't keep the girls' bedroom door open and watch both the toddlers and put the babies to sleep. Like, you can't, because if you keep the door open, the girls won't sleep. The babies weren't able to sleep. Like, that was always a hard part for us, because we were like, dude, like, naps, like, today sucked because we cannot be, like, I couldn't get the girls, like, it just really jacked everything up. I got the girls asleep, but then, the kids spilt something over there, or the kids, whatever happens, like, right? Like, they do stuff. They're jumping around. They're just unsupervised. And I know you should not stress too much, but it is stressful because you got the other babies to worry about, and then you got Logan and Layden to worry about in the other room. So we just knew, like, hey, this has to get to a point to where one of us can be home and do everything we need to do without, like, having to hold all these kids and rock them or put them to sleep. So that's where when we moved, we were like, we gotta do this. Like, we gotta get our plan. And so Elizabeth had put together a modified version, basically, of like the Ferber method. So it was inspiration from the Ferber method, where you let them cry it out, but it was a little modified. Like I don't know all the exact details of the Ferber method, but if you look it up, it's basically, you want to, there's different stages of how you roll it out, and you want, you need the baby to cry it out. Well, that's basically what we did with the girls now, because after their first birthday, in March, after the first birthday, we started sleep training them, and there was some trial and error to it. Like, there's some growing pains about that, because you need to figure out, okay, where do we step in and where do we not, right? So I think when we first started it, right after the first birthday, so I would say end of March, April is when we started it. Like I mentioned before, the girls are older. They were older at this point, not newborns anymore. Of course, they're babies, and they're they're delayed because they were born prematurely. But they come in, and we were like, okay, do it for naps, do it for bedtime. We're just going to get them ready, and this is also what also went into this too, is that we had to start decreasing bottles because they're eating more solids. So we did that, and as you take away the bottles, one of the key bottles we took away was the bedtime bottle, like the nighttime. Like after they were one, we were like, okay, no more bottle to go to bed, because they don't need that anymore, and we need to start sleep training them. So we get them ready in their sleeper sacks, and you change them. They're in the sleeper sacks. We all give them a kiss goodnight. And then what we do is we lay them down. And when we lay them down, they're all in bed. They cry, of course, because, they don't want to be put down. But they cry, and then we have this little, like, shush machine that goes, like, shh. Like, if you listen to it as an adult, you'll probably go crazy because you're like, okay, that's way too many shushes. But it's still soothing for the girls. Like, we found it. We had ordered it and, realized, hey, this... like they do like this. And so that on top of the hatch, which is our white noise machine, we would play the shusher for 30 minutes. And so it took about 2 weeks because, and I mentioned earlier about the trial and error thing, because as you try this, like as you lay them down, they start to, they cry, but then they start to also realize, like, they're so familiar with each other now. They know they're all in the same room. Like, they're not playing with each other, but you do hear them talk, which is pretty cool. Like, they, like Mills will just randomly just start talking. And it takes her probably like longer than 10 minutes on average to go to sleep. But what we're able to do is we're able to just lay them down, play the shush machine. It has the hatch white noise on. And then we leave the room. And then they start, like, they cry. And eventually, probably usually after 10 minutes, they started to figure out, like, hey, like, we can put ourselves to sleep. Like, it started to naturally figure itself out. Like, that, I don't know how else to explain it. Like, that's just how we had started doing it. And there were some instances where we were like, okay, we have to go in there because, like, Samara was, like, screaming, like, and we still have the owlet sock on for Samara because, if you know her story, if you listen to the previous episodes, she was underweight and severely underweight. She was only 1 pound. And we have always been extra cautious about her because of her situation. So we've been keeping the sock on, right, to monitor her to make sure she's good. So one of the times she's crying, and then the monitor gives off like a heart rate, like outlet notifies us and says, hey, check on baby because like the heart rate's like way too high. So those are the instances where we're like, okay, we got to figure out a good, like, when to go in and when not to go in. Because once you go in there and you break, then all of them, and if they're all awake, they're all going to want to be held. Like, there's no way to like calm them down. Like, it takes a long time after that. So it took them about 2 weeks to get the hang of that. And after 2 weeks, they started to sleep through the night. And they put themselves to sleep. And it was awesome. Like, it was great. Like, we were like, okay, they caught on faster than I thought. And now, with them plus the big kids, we're no longer holding anyone to sleep. So that's how we started pushing on the sleep training for the triplets. Again, I don't know. I wish I had advice for an earlier stage, but I do think that this could work for an earlier stage, like a younger age for them. Like if you wanted to try this, like I would definitely look into getting one of those shush machines. I will find exact which one and I'll put in the link in the description. But if you find, like I will put that in there, try that because that definitely does help. And I know my cousins have had one too, and they use it for their babies, right? So definitely look into that. But we had them sleep trained for it took 2 weeks, and then everyone got sick. And when everyone gets sick, when you have kids, especially more than one, it's like it cycles through the house. Everyone got sick, and and then the girls, of course, not comfortable. They start not sleeping through the night because they're in pain and they're congested, all these different things that add up. So that sucked because that took away all the progress we did for the sleep training. And now they were basically back almost to square one for a little bit, for at least a couple weeks while they were sick. Cause that was tough. Cause then you get like a week or two of rest. I forgot how long it was. Like you rest for like a bit. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, now we're back at the whole, waking up in the middle of the night again. Like that was hard. So the other good thing about the sleep training part was with the triplets and how we did it is that they all started to get used to each other's cry. So when one of them, like this was after they got sick. After they got sick, we restarted, and since then, we're in August. So they've been, after they got sick, they've been probably about sleep trained again for about like sleeping through the night completely for about 2 months now. Yeah, going on 2 months. It's been great. But what I was saying earlier was that when they would cry, randomly they still cry in the middle of the night. Not like long or anything like that, but they will randomly still cry in the middle of the night. And when they do, the other girls, like if one cries, the other two typically stay asleep. So which is awesome because they've like become used to like sleeping through like that type of loud noise. So that has been like really helpful because now I remember we used to freak out when one of them would cry in the middle of the night because we'd be like, oh man, we have to go in there or they're going to wake them all up. So we have to go in there and take like Nora out. We have to take Millie out or whoever it was that was crying. We knew we'd always get paranoid and be like, okay, we have to go in there. Otherwise they all wake up and then we're in serious pain. But now it's to a point to where they cry, and if someone wakes up like at midnight and they start crying then no one else wakes up, and then that baby will eventually put herself back to sleep after like 5 minutes. Like it's usually no longer than 5 minutes. So I'm happy to say that this journey of sleep training, definitely, I don't think we're the model parents when it comes to sleep training at all, but I'm happy to say that all 5 kids go to sleep on their own, and now we are past those sleepless nights. It's been great. Like it's been awesome. Really good to have that time back, to have that sleep back, and get that energy back, because that was a year long like double hit because of the triplets and the toddlers, like putting them all to sleep. Like that was tough. Like that would eat up a lot of our time. Now we're slowly getting our time back, and we're able to focus on other things like that are happening in our house. And whether that's just like Elizabeth and I in our time, or we're focusing on things like as the kids are now getting older and getting their own personalities, able to put more energy back towards that because that was hard. And, we have help, of course. We have help at the house, but it's, when you have those sleepless nights, those still tough. Like those are hard. So I wish I was the model sleep training parent, but we're not. This is our journey, and I hope that I was able to share some things that were helpful to you all. I don't have a name for the method we did. We'll just call it the modified Ferber method for the triplets, and that helped us. So I would definitely recommend giving it a try and seeing what you're able to do for your twins or your triplets or your quads, and see how that works, because you'll be surprised, and it's going to take some, using your best judgment as a parent, when to break or not. But for the most part, you'll see that kids are capable of so many things, and just put that trust in them, because they'll figure it out. And I know that's something that it took us 2 rounds of parenting to get to our triplets to kind of figure out, like, hey, these kids are capable of a lot more than what we think. And you have to be able to let go and believe in them and push them. That's what we're here for. We're to help them in this world and in this life. And, that's our duty to them as parents. Take care of them, of course, but also make sure they're able to be independent, because that's important. So if you have questions about anything when it comes to parenting, triplets, twins, multiples, singletons, let me know. You guys can reach out to me at isaiah@tripletdouble.com. Make sure to follow me on social media, or on Instagram, Facebook, or not Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Threads, TikTok. Handles are @Triplet Double. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. I'd appreciate any feedback. And I look forward to connecting with you guys on next week's episode. Thanks, everyone.